Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you are watching Newsnight on DD India and DD News, your prime-time destination for news and bespoke analysis. It's good to have you again with us. All right, on the show tonight, the Afghan government and the Taliban met in Qatar's capital Doha on Saturday morning for peace talks. Now, the talks are aimed at ending 2 decades of war that's killed tens of thousands of people. In fact, the opening ceremony of the intra-Afghan negotiations comes exactly a day after the 19th anniversary of the 11th September 2001 terror attacks in the United States. Now, the US had retaliated by attacking Afghanistan, where the Taliban had given Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden sanctuary. Now, Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar was among those invited to speak at the opening ceremony in Doha. We'll give the lowdown on those talks. Also on the show, Prime Minister Modi takes part in a virtual housewarming ceremony of 1.75 lakh houses built in rural parts of Madhya Pradesh. Plus, news and updates from around the world. All that and much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. Prime Minister Modi inaugurates 1.75 lakh houses built under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Grameen in Madhya Pradesh. These houses were completed in a record time of 45 to 60 days in spite of the coronavirus pandemic. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar addresses the opening ceremony of the intra-Afghan negotiations in Qatar via video conference. Says peace process must be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled, and that the rights of minorities and women must be upheld. The Principal Secretary to Prime Minister comprehensively reviews the COVID-19 situation, the stage of vaccine development and vaccine distribution plan discussed, the need for district health action plans also discussed. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and former Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis condemned the attack on a Navy veteran by Shiva Sena activists in Mumbai. Rajnath Singh says it is completely unacceptable. Fadnavis calls it state-sponsored terror. All 4 accused granted bail. BJP Chief JP Nadda meets Bihar Chief Minister and JDU Chief Nitish Kumar in Patna. Launches the Atmanirbhar Bihar campaign of the BJP for the election in November. JM announces alliance with the RJD. In a new record, over 12 lakh crore rupees transferred directly into bank accounts under the direct benefit transfer scheme of the government, eliminating the role of middlemen. Over 2.5 lakh crore rupees transferred in the last 4 months alone during the coronavirus pandemic. Medical entrance exams to be held on Sunday. Over 15 lakh students to appear in the All India test, which was rescheduled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Elaborate arrangement in place for the safe conduct of the exam. And in sports, the English Premier League kicks off with Arsenal registering an emphatic win over Fulham. Title holder Liverpool set to start its campaign with a match against Leeds United. Welcome once again. Prime Minister Modi on Saturday launched 1.75 lakh houses built under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Grameen in Madhya Pradesh. Now, these houses were completed in a record time of 45 to 60 days in spite of the corona pandemic. Here's a report.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated 1.75 lakh houses built under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Rural in Madhya Pradesh. PM said that even during the time of coronavirus pandemic, houses under PM Awas Yojana were constructed in just 45 to 60 days, which is a very good example of turning disaster into opportunity.
आपदा को अवसर में बदलने का ये बहुत ही उत्तम उदाहरण है। आप सोचेंगे कि ये कैसे संभव हुआ। पहले 125 दिन, अब 40 से 60 दिन के बीच में कैसे हुआ। साथियों, इस तेजी में बहुत बड़ा योगदान रहा शहरों से जो हमारे श्रमिक भाई बहन लौटे हैं। उनके पास हुनर भी था, इच्छा शक्ति भी थी, और वो इसमें जुड़ गए, और इसके कारण ये परिणाम मिला है।
Prime Minister had given a clarion call of housing for all by 2022. So far, 1.14 crore houses have already been built across the country under the program. Under Awas Yojana Gramin, each beneficiary is given 100% grant of rupees 1.20 lakh. 60% of grant is shared by centre and 40% is provided by the state government. The scheme envisages to construct 2.95 crore houses by the year 2022. Prime Minister said that 1.75 lakh beneficiaries in Madhya Pradesh who are moving into their new houses have got their dream home and are also confident about the future of their children. Prime Minister said that beneficiaries who got homes have joined the ranks of 2.25 crore families who have got their own house in the last 6 years.
आज आप देश के उन 2.25 करोड़ परिवारों में शामिल हो गए हैं जिन्हें बीते 6 वर्षों में अपना घर मिला है, जो अब किराए के नहीं, झुग्गियों में नहीं, कच्चे मकान में नहीं, अपने घर में रह रहे हैं, पक्के घर में रह रहे हैं।
Addressing the event, Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan said that dreams of people of having their own house are now coming true.
अब मकान के लिए 1,25,000, शौचालय के लिए 12,000, मनरेगा की मजदूरी अलग से, और इससे इतने सुंदर मकान बनाए, और केवल मकान नहीं, गरीब की जिंदगी के हर सपने को साकार किया है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने मकान में बिजली, हर घर बिजली पहुंचाने का लक्ष्य पूरा किया है। शुद्ध पीने का पानी, जल जीवन मिशन उन्होंने प्रारंभ किया है।
Prime Minister recalled his promise made on 15th of August 2020 from the ramparts of the Red Fort on laying optical fiber cable in around 6,000 villages in the next 1,000 days. He said even in the corona period, under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana, this work of construction of houses has progressed rapidly. Prime Minister said that Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is not just about building houses, it is about building self-confidence and empowering the poor. Bureau Report, DD India.
Prime Minister Modi interacted with some of the beneficiaries there. They thanked him for fulfilling their dream of owning a proper house. Listen in.
राम राम अच्छे हो कि
कसो काय મજામાં છે
મજામાં છે
घर बनावा कई आफत तो नहीं आई।
हमारे गांव और सरदारपुर तहसील और जिला के सभी गरीब और भाई बहनों के ओर से हम सभी शुभकामना देते हैं। जो हमारे गरीब भाई को मकान मिले हैं उसके सबको तरफ से मैं शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। और जो हमारा मकान बना है हलमा करके, उसमें हमारे गरीब भाई सभी सहयोग करते हैं, तो उसमें मजदूरी हमारे को नहीं देनी पड़ती है, सिर्फ सहयोग करते हैं। जो लॉकडाउन में बंद था तो सभी घर पे ही थे, और जो मजदूर आदमी थे हमारे भाई और बहनों वो भी घर पर ही थे,
और उनको कोई पैसा नहीं देना पड़ता है।
कोई पैसे नहीं, वो सिर्फ शाम को हम उनको खाना खिलाते हैं, खिचड़ी बनाते हैं या फिर मक्का की रोटी और अच्छी सी दाल बनाते हैं बढ़िया, और प्याज व्याज काट के ने बढ़िया से खिलाते हैं शाम को।
प्यारेलाल जी, कभी सोचा था कि आपके यहाँ एक पक्का अपना घर होगा?
विश्वास था कि हमको अवश्य मिलेगा, जैसा सबको मिल रहा है सर वैसा हमको भी मिला। हमको विश्वास है कि आवास हमको भी मिल गया।
पहले आपका मकान कैसा था और मकान में क्या दिक्कत?
हमारा मकान कच्चा का था, खपड़ेल था। आंधी तूफान में खपड़े उड़ जाते थे, पानी गिरने पर बहुत चूता था, इसलिए बहुत समस्या था। सर हमको आवास मिल गया तो बहुत आनंद आ गया।
परिवार में, आस पड़ोस और रिश्ते नाते में इस नया मकान मिला है तो क्या लग रहा है सबका, कैसा माहौल है?
पक्का आवास मिलने से श्रीमान मुझे बहुत लाभ हुआ है। आज मेरी समाज में प्रतिष्ठा बढ़ी है। कच्चा मकान होने से मेरी बेटी की सर्प के काटने से मृत्यु हो गई माननीय। 24 दिन के बाद मेरे
क्या हुआ था नरेंद्र जी? क्या
कच्चे मकान में श्रीमान महोदय मेरी बच्ची की सर्प के काटने से मृत्यु हो गई। 24 दिन के अंतराल में मेरे बेटे की मृत्यु हो गई। हमारे ऊपर दुखों का पहाड़ टूटा श्रीमान महोदय। कुछ समय के बाद शासन के संबल से मुझे समझने का अवसर मिला। आवास के साथ समृद्ध पर्यावास की 19 योजनाओं के माध्यम से मुझे उभरने का अवसर मिला। मेरा आपसे निवेदन है, आग्रह है माननीय, मेरी धर्मपत्नी से भी जरूर बात
जरूर बताइए।
आपने मेरे को गैस उज्ज्वला के साथ गैस दी है, मेरे को किचन बना है, मेरे को शौचालय भी दिया। मेरा आग्रह है, आपसे निवेदन है बहुत ज्यादा, मेरे घर पे आमंत्रित आए और मेरे हाथ की चाय और पूया खाएं और आप आमंत्रित स्वीकार करने का आप मेरे को हाँ या ना में जवाब दें।
चलिए, आपका निमंत्रण मेरी सर आंखों पर, और मैं भी ईश्वर से प्रार्थना करूंगा कि आपके हाथ से भोजन प्राप्त करूं।
Now, Information and Broadcasting Minister Prakash Javadekar congratulated Prime Minister Modi in a tweet. He said, and I quote him here, "I laud PM Modi for Greh Pravesh in 1.75 lakh houses under Prime Minister Awas Yojana Gramin. Now, this milestone has been achieved today thanks to his dedication to serving the poor," unquote. All right, now let me dive straight into our cover story. Peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government opened in Qatar on Saturday. A lasting ceasefire tops the agenda of the talks. There are other issues too. For instance, the Taliban want to reshape Afghanistan into an Islamic emirate, but President Ashraf Ghani's government wants to adhere to the existing constitution that guarantees many rights, including greater freedoms for women. More in the next report. Historic peace negotiations between the Taliban and the elected Afghan government began on Saturday morning in Qatar's capital Doha. The direct intra-Afghan talks followed the US Taliban agreement on withdrawal of American troops from the country. On 29th February, the US and the Taliban signed a troop withdrawal pact in a bid to end the war. The talks began one day after the 19th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the United States that triggered its military involvement in Afghanistan. The talks are aimed at arriving at a comprehensive peace deal, including a permanent ceasefire between the Afghan government and the Taliban. The Taliban needs to assure Kabul that it will renounce violence, stop the killing of Afghan officials and civilians, accept the Afghan constitution, and uphold women's rights, among others. Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar attended the opening ceremony of the talks via a video conference. He said on the occasion that India respects the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of Afghanistan. He said on the occasion that India respects the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of Afghanistan. He expressed confidence on the continuous growth of relationship between India and Afghanistan.
Any peace process must be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, and Afghan-controlled. It has to respect national sovereignty and territorial integrity of Afghanistan. It should promote the values of human rights and democracy that can foster development. The interests of the minorities, women, and vulnerable must be ensured. And most important, the issue of violence across the country and its neighborhood has to be effectively addressed.
It was the first time the Taliban sat across the table with the representatives of the Afghan government to discuss about the future of the country. The ceremony began at 11:30 in the morning with a recitation from the Quran, followed by opening comments by Qatar's foreign minister. The Afghan delegation is led by Dr. Abdullah Abdullah, who chairs the High Council for National Reconciliation, while Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar leads the Taliban delegation.
I am very proud that on behalf of Afghanistan, for opening the peace negotiations, I am here. And I pray that the Almighty God bless and help the Afghan peace negotiation between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and Taliban movement, because this is the desire of our people. I hope that both sides pay attention to the provisions of holy religion of Islam, and for getting to this very important purpose, we should pay attention to the benefits of all, not to the benefits of just some people.
U.S. Foreign Minister Mike Pompeo also spoke on the occasion. He met the Afghan and Taliban delegations separately after the opening ceremony.
We believe firmly that protecting the rights of all Afghans is indeed the best way for you to break the cycle of violence. Of course, I can only urge these actions. You will write the next chapter in Afghan history. We hope this chapter is one of reconciliation and progress, not another chronicle of tears and bloodshed. We urge you to make decisions that move away from the violence and the corruption and towards peace and development and prosperity.
The intra-Afghan talks were originally scheduled to begin on the 10th of March. They were repeatedly pushed back amid disputes over a prisoner exchange that included the release of hundreds of battle-hardened Taliban terrorists. After months of delay, a dispute over the Taliban's demand for the release of 5,000 prisoners was resolved a few days ago. Ahead of the US presidential election in November, President Donald Trump is looking to show progress in his pledge to end the US involvement and pull out most of the foreign forces stationed in Afghanistan. The US has reduced its troop levels, and by November is expected to have fewer than 5,000 soldiers in Afghanistan, down from about 13,000 when the US Taliban deal was signed. Newsnight Desk, DD India. All right, I want to talk over the next couple of minutes about India's relationship with Afghanistan. And when you talk about that relationship, India's assistance to Afghanistan forms a key component of that bilateral relationship. Why do I say that? Because India is the largest donor in the region. India's assistance is in excess of $2 billion US. Now, these are involved in medium and large infrastructure projects in Afghanistan. For instance, take a look at this new Afghan Parliament building, inaugurated on 25th December 2015 by Prime Minister Modi and President Ghani. Next up is the Afghan-India Friendship Dam, formerly known as the Salma Dam. Now, this is very important. The air freight corridor, this benefits Afghan traders to ferry goods to and from India. And also, the Shahtoot Dam and drinking water project for Kabul forms another key project by India. Now, India is currently focusing on 116 high-impact development projects in all 34 provinces of Afghanistan. Now, in the past, India has built a road linking Zaranj with Dilaram, and also a 220 kV power transmission line from Pule Kumri to Kabul, the capital city. In addition to upgradation of the telephone exchanges in 11 provinces of the country, and expansion of the TV network by providing an uplink and downlink facilities in all 34 provincial capitals. Also, the Afghan National Agriculture Science and Technology University at Kandahar also supplying food items including wheat in large quantities to the Afghan people. And also, when we talk about mining, we can't forget about the Haji Kag iron ore deposits, and including a proposed mines institute in the capital city of Kabul. In addition, we've given 50 Afghan student scholarships to study at the ISM Dhanbad as well. So that should give you a sense of the extent of cooperation between India and Afghanistan. And because of those projects, India has earned a lot of goodwill among the people of Afghanistan. All right, time for our In Focus segment in which we're discussing about India and intra-Afghan talks, prospects for peace. I repeat, India and intra-Afghan talks, prospects for peace. Right, joining me are two very special guests, Dr. T.C.A. Raghavan and Professor Harsh V. Pant. Professor Pant is Director of Studies and Head of the Strategic Studies Program at the Observer Research Foundation. Now, the ORF is a privately held think tank headquartered in New Delhi. And Professor Pant has several books to his credit, including most recently, Indian Foreign Policy, the Modi Era. And Dr. Raghavan is a former Indian envoy to Pakistan and Singapore. He's also headed the Pakistan desk in the Indian Foreign Ministry. Today is the DG of the Indian Council of World Affairs, or ICWA. Now, the ICWA is a think tank funded by the Indian government. It was established way back in 1943. If I might add, for the benefit of viewers, the ICWA was declared as an institution of national importance by an Act of Parliament in the year 2001. Now, he's written 3 books, including one titled The People Next Door, The Curious History of India's Relations with, you guessed it, Pakistan. And hold on, we're not done yet. Ambassador Raghavan was only one of two Indians who sat at the table with Taliban at Moscow in November 2018. India sent him and another diplomat, former diplomat, to Moscow to take part in those Afghan peace talks, and that was a first for India. All right, coming to my guests now, Ambassador Raghavan and Professor Pant, welcome to News Night. If I can start with you, Ambassador Raghavan, would you like to share with our viewers your first-hand experiences or impressions about the Taliban, their ideology, what they stand for, and prospects for peace, given Taliban's propensity or proclivity for fomenting attacks inside and outside Afghanistan?
Well, that is the central question before this negotiation which began today, as to how to reconcile an insurgent group with a long history of using violence to achieve its political objectives, with a country which has a democratic constitution. Of course, these talks in particular are important because the history of Afghanistan in the last 30 years has been of governments being displaced either by coups or by armed action. So in that sense, the fact that the government of Afghanistan is sitting on the table with the Taliban is significant. The External Affairs Minister, as you had mentioned, said that the key point for these talks is that they should be Afghan-controlled, Afghan-led, and Afghan-owned.
Right.
My own impressions about the Taliban, such as they are that on the surface at least, they insist that they should not be judged purely by their history, and in fact, they are committed to achieving a peaceful settlement. On the other hand, the fact that these talks take place without a reduction in the number of attacks or without a reduction in violence does suggest that this is going to be quite a complex process as we proceed into the future.
Absolutely. Professor Pant, Ambassador Raghavan mentioned about the Indian Foreign Ministry statement and Minister's statement at that opening ceremony. If I can flag a couple of issues in that statement issued by the MEA, it says, as Ambassador Raghavan said, we have this consistent position, it should be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled. But this statement also says, and I quote the MEA here, the interests of minorities, women and vulnerable sections of society must be preserved, and the issue of violence across the country and its neighborhood has to be effectively addressed, unquote. Your thoughts on those key points flagged by India as well?
Well, as you point out, the Indian position on on the process being Afghan-owned and Afghan-led is something that has been very, very consistent and remains to be the pivotal position, the central position for India over the last few years. But I think what is more important for India is the kind of issues that you pointed out in the statement, that the gains of the last few decades are not lost.
True.
That whatever Afghanistan has gained in the since 2001 with the overthrow of the Taliban, then the democratic process whereby minorities, whereby women and other vulnerable sections of the society have been able to get a voice in the democratic process, that should not go away, because that would be dismantling the whole idea of modern Afghanistan. And in that sense, India has played a very, very important role with its projects, with its ideas, with the capacity building that India has done in Afghanistan. And I think therefore Indian Foreign Minister was insistent and underscored again and again that this is something that India values very, very significantly. And therefore for India, it is not simply a question of the process, but it is also a question of what kind of an outcome that process is going to produce. And I think that outcome, as far as India is concerned, should be a process where not only the involvement of various stakeholders is part of this process, but also the outcome in terms of a more inclusive democratic order that Afghanistan has been able to build over the last few years should not get dismantled. And I think that was very rightly pointed out by the Indian Foreign Minister.
Ambassador Raghavan, now correct me if I'm wrong, but these talks are essentially aimed at forging a consensus domestically inside Afghanistan between the government in Kabul and the Taliban, and there are various issues to be discussed here. The Taliban insists on having Sharia and Islamic system in Afghanistan going forward as well. There are question marks about its decision on enforcing a ceasefire going forward, for instance, upholding women's rights, minority rights, adhering to the constitution of Afghanistan, renouncing violence, cutting ties with all terror groups, and also stopping those killings. Now, if I can flag a couple of points here. Now, according to news reports coming out of Doha this morning, now Abdullah Abdullah, the head of the Afghan delegation, called in his speech for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, but his plea went unanswered by Taliban co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, who made no mention of a truce in his opening remarks. Instead, Baradar repeated the insurgents' message that Afghanistan must be run through according to Islamic law. So your thoughts on these, outstanding issues that still need to be resolved between the government of Afghanistan and Taliban going forward as well?
Well, there are numerous issues. The first and immediate one is, of course, the ceasefire. But clearly what is also what you have at the table over there are two different ideas of Afghanistan which are colliding with each other. And these ideas can be summarized as being that of an Islamic emirate versus that of an Islamic republic. And there's a whole range of issues involved in terms of what separates these two ideas of Afghanistan. There is also a third factor which is equally significant, which is that of the US withdrawal. And the fact that these talks take place really under the shadow of US policy, which is determined by the fact that the United States is clearly exhausted by its longest military engagement in its history. So all these factors are at play. I don't think it is anyone's case that this is going to be a straightforward or simple set of negotiations. But the fact that this meeting is taking place, delayed as it is, the fact that at least on the surface, certain common points are being made by all the delegates, but most of all, the fact that people in Afghanistan want peace. I think these are all reasons to be slightly optimistic, although the road ahead is going to be very, very difficult and complex.
Indeed. Professor Pant, I want to quote an Afghan resident of Kabul, and according to a newspaper report, now this is a very profound statement to be made by a resident of Kabul. Now this gentleman says, according to news reports, My beard was black when the war began. It is snow white now, and we are still at war. Now, there's a fatigue setting in Afghanistan and outside about this. Obama called it an avoidable war. Trump called it an endless war. Now, in your estimation, do you think the U.S. is in a hurry to clinch a deal between now and November 3rd, when the elections take place in the U.S.? And if that is true, is that a good negotiating tactic? Because as John Bolton says, you and I may have the watches, but Taliban has the time.
Yes, I think, in some ways, this is a recipe for disaster. If you think that elections in US should be the most important focal point in determining the trajectory and the outcome of these talks. But clearly, we have seen since Obama administration's days that there has been this desire on the part of successive administrations, and not simply Trump administration, to get out of Afghanistan. As you point out, there is a fatigue not simply in the international community, but in particular in the US about this war. And I think there is a political consensus across the political divide that this war needs to end. Obama came with a certain agenda. He could not complete it. Mr. Trump also had a particular agenda, and if he, for example, can get a deal before November elections, then certainly he would tom-tom it and he would make it a big deal in his election campaign. So certainly he would be pushing for a deal. But what we have also seen in the past is that it doesn't really work like that. On the ground, there are different issues. The stakeholders are, in some ways not working according to the American electoral calendar. So in the past, this had happened, and I'm sure it would be very difficult for the Trump administration to control the pace of these negotiations. As we know, in February, America made its announcement that it wants to draw down from Afghanistan. And since that announcement, there has been this speculation about these talks. So now these talks would only begin, we are mid-September. So it has taken us so many months just to get to the very starting point of these negotiations. So I think it's very unlikely that the negotiations will proceed according to the American electoral calendar, howsoever hard the Trump administration might desire it to be given the electoral politics. So I think we should be cognizant of that reality. But of course, Americans would like to push and get an outcome before the elections, and that is the reality that all of Afghanistan and all the stakeholders in Afghanistan should be cognizant of.
Absolutely. Ambassador Raghavan, you're a keen observer of Pakistani domestic politics. Now, there are many stakeholders in Afghan peace, many actors, some good, some not so good. How do you view Pakistan's role in all of this, in the Afghan peace talks? Is Pakistan a part of the problem or solution? And how do you read the Taliban-ISI nexus, so to speak?
Well, it is no secret that nexus is very strong, and certainly there are many people in Pakistan who feel that the current position, the outcome that we see today in Doha, is a vindication of all that Pakistan has stood for in terms of supporting the Taliban, despite all the promises it made to the United States and to the rest of the international community. So it is possible that there will be a view in Pakistan which feels vindicated, and there is a sense of triumphalism that despite all the pressures on it, the groups that it supported in Afghanistan have come a long way and may possibly be a very important element in the next government. But there is also another view in Pakistan, which might yet be a minority view, but there is that view nonetheless, which sees the domestic consequences for Pakistan itself of a radicalized regime appearing in Afghanistan again, and Pakistan has suffered the consequences of such radicalization within its own territory. So the backlash of nurturing radical proxies is a risk which Pakistan has taken in the past, and we have to hope and see whether that policy has now changed to some extent, or whether they are going to repeat the same mistakes as they did some years ago. The fact that the Taliban exists on the ground in Afghanistan cannot be airbrushed away.
Indeed.
Nevertheless, to make sure that the gains of the last 20 years are also not discarded should be a key element of the Pakistan strategy as well. Whether that is so or not, we have to wait and see.
Absolutely. I'm afraid I've completely run out of time. So on that note, I want to thank both my guests, Ambassador Raghavan and Professor Pant, for sharing your insights and perspectives on this developing story. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, moving on for now. Principal Secretary to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Dr. P.K. Mishra, chaired a high-level review meeting to comprehensively review the COVID-19 preparedness and response. The meeting focused on evidence-based learning on management of cases across the districts and states. The meeting also discussed the stage of vaccine development and vaccine distribution plan. The district health action plans for long-term management of various aspects of COVID-19 were also discussed in that meeting. It was noted with some satisfaction that all MFAD groups have worked very hard to achieve benchmarks in COVID-19 management. And the Principal Secretary, the Prime Minister, directed all concerned for an evidence-based preparedness of all aspects of COVID-19 with active participation of districts and states for effectiveness. He directed all concerned to build on the knowledge and analysis that has been developed over the last few months to work out the detailed action plan for the coming months as well. Now, the need for continuously upgrading and augmenting human resources, getting the right mix of testing for effective case management, contact tracing and isolation, uninterrupted oxygen supply and other medical equipment were all discussed at some length. Also, integration of Ayush for prophylaxis and mitigation of syndrome was also discussed. The need for psychosocial care facilities, effective behavior change communication system, strong district public health team surveillance, a data team, effective supply chain, livelihoods and social protection were also discussed. The Principal Secretary also emphasized the need for continuous caution and prevention by maintaining 2-meter distance, use of mask and hand wash, the need to unlock work and still follow the non-pharmacological preventive measures was strongly recommended. And time now for all the news related to the COVID-19 pandemic in our COVID Wrap segment. The country continues to move strongly against the coronavirus, sees another record surge in the number of people recovered with the disease. India sees more than 81,000 patients beat the coronavirus during the last 24 hours alone. The total number of people recovering from the coronavirus in the country reaches more than 36 lakh, with 60% of the total recoveries from Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. Now, although the overall recovery rate in the country has reached 77.77%. The ICMR has released data regarding testing capacity till 11 September. Now, more than 55 lakh samples have been tested for COVID-19. In addition to this, more than 1 million people have been tested in the last 24 hours alone. Union Minister Shripad Naik recovers from the coronavirus. The minister has been discharged from hospital in Panaji, where he was admitted since August the 12th. A mobile van for COVID-19 testing in Punjab's Ludhiana is conducting free tests. Now, in view of the medical entrance examination, Punjab will not hold any lockdown this Sunday. However, shops selling non-essential items will remain closed. Hyderabad-based Bharat Biotech on Friday released study results of its COVID-19 vaccine candidate Covaxin, which is currently in phase 1 and 2 of human trials. The results show replication of the virus in the nasal cavity, throat and lung tissues of monkeys. Adverse events were not seen in animals immunized with a 2-dose vaccination regimen. Right, in other news, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and former Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis have condemned the attack on a veteran of the Indian Navy by Shiv Sena activists in Mumbai. Rajnath Singh said the attack is completely unacceptable. Fadnavis calls it state-sponsored terrorism. All four accused have been granted bail.
Images that put one and all to shame coming in from Mumbai. A retired naval officer was beaten in Mumbai allegedly by activists of Maharashtra's ruling Shiv Sena for forwarding a cartoon mocking Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray. Images posted online showed Madan Sharma with wounds on his face and a bloodshot eye. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh condemned the attack after a telephone conversation with the Navy veteran. Spoke to retired naval officer Sri Madan Sharma, who was attacked by hooligans in Mumbai, and inquired about his health. Such attacks on ex-servicemen are completely unacceptable and deplorable. I wish Madanji a speedy recovery. And understandably disturbed, Madan Sharma demanded strict action against the accused.
WhatsApp एक शॉर्ट मीडिया है जो एक दूसरे से जुड़े रहने का माध्यम है. उससे जो न्यूज़ आती है उसको हम फॉरवर्ड करते हैं. कार्टून हो या चाहे कोई मैसेज है वो कहाँ से बनता है, गवर्नमेंट को उसको ध्यान देना जरूरी है.
His family members are also demanding justice.
ये आगे भी नहीं होना चाहिए. जो भी चीज़ ये हो रहा है, अभी आप देखेंगे अभी कोई अपना आवाज़ उठाता है महाराष्ट्र में, मुंबई में, उसको मारते हैं वो लोग. ठीक है, जो भी गवर्नमेंट है.
ये तो पुलिस को देखना चाहिए कि इनके ऊपर क्या धाराएं लगानी चाहिए एक सीनियर सिटीजन के ऊपर अटैक करने के ऊपर, और उनकी जान भी जा सकती थी. ये लोग जैसे मारे हैं, लापरवाही नहीं की है, जानबूझ के किया है.
Members of Madan Sharma's family and his well-wishers, as well as BJP supporters, protested outside the Mumbai police headquarters against the bail granted to the 6 accused. Shiv Sena leader Kamlesh Kadam is amongst the accused. They face charges under sections 325, 143, 147 and 149 of the Indian Penal Code. Denying any political interference, the Mumbai police maintains investigation is on.
442 का जो सेक्शन है जिसमें क्रिमिनल ट्रेसपास इनसाइड द बिल्डिंग गेट के अंदर जाते वक्त कुछ दिखते हैं, उसमें हम वेरीफाई कर रहे हैं, और 452 अगर लगता है तो वी अप्लाई दोस सेक्शंस एंड टेक इफेक्टिव लीगल एक्शन.
Former Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis on Saturday said that the beating up of a former naval officer in Mumbai is a kind of state-sponsored terror.
एक प्रकार से ये स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड टेरर जैसी अवस्था महाराष्ट्र में तैयार हो रही है. मैंने कल अपने ट्वीट के माध्यम से उद्धव जी को आह्वान किया है कि गुंडाराज को रोकिए, नेवल ऑफिसर को इस प्रकार से मारना, और उसमें भी जब मीडिया का दबाव बना, हम लोगों ने दबाव बनाया तो 6 लोगों को अरेस्ट की, लेकिन टेबल बेल दे दी, 10 मिनट में उनको छोड़ दिया. अगर इस प्रकार से बातें होगी तो मुझे लगता है कहीं ना कहीं जिस प्रकार का ये वातावरण तैयार हो रहा है, ऐसा तो महाराष्ट्र में इससे पहले हमने कभी नहीं देखा.
ये पूरा मैच फिक्सिंग है, मतलब बिना इन्वेस्टिगेशन किए हुए पुलिस ने इस प्रकार से उनको छोड़ दिया. और जब आप सीसीटीवी फुटेज देखेंगे तो अंदर ट्रेसपास किया है. 452 तो ऑटोमेटिक लगता है और इसको नॉन बेलेबल ऑफेंस है, और 326 तो लगना चाहिए क्योंकि ऐसा प्रकार से मारा है कि इट इज अटेम्प्ट टू मर्डर.
It's hoped that strict action will be taken against those who indulge in such hooliganism. With Yogesh Sheetal in Mumbai, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And the visit of BJP President JP Nadda to Bihar has warmed up the political scene, with the state going to the polls later this year. Nadda took part in various party events in Patna, Darbhanga and Muzaffarpur. He enthused and energized the party's rank and file. He also launched the Atmanirbhar Bihar Abhiyan. Rajesh Raj reports.
With the launch of Atmanirbhar Bihar campaign song began the formal start of BJP's poll campaign for Bihar Assembly polls. BJP President JP Nadda, who reached Patna on a 2-day visit, launched the party's Atmanirbhar Bihar Abhiyan. occasion, BJP President JP Nadda flagged off the Atmanirbhar Bihar Raths as well. BJP President expressed hope that NDA will be in electoral fray in Bihar under Nitish Kumar's leadership.
चुनाव के मैदान में एनडीए का गठबंधन नीतीश जी के नेतृत्व में भारतीय जनता पार्टी और लोक जनशक्ति पार्टी सभी मिलकर चुनाव लड़ेंगे और विजयश्री हासिल करेंगे.
As part of his itinerary, BJP President JP Nadda met JDU Chief and Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar. Both leaders are understood to have discussed key issue of seat sharing among NDA alliance partners. Thereafter, JP Nadda reached Darbhanga, where he directly interacted with Makhana farmers and fishermen.
हमारी पार्टी को भी मजबूती प्रदान करें और अपनी इकोनॉमी को, अपने आर्थिक जगत को विकास की ओर ले जाएं और मखाने के माध्यम से और मछली उत्पादन के माध्यम से एक नई दृष्टि इस इलाके को मिले और विकास के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में कोई कमी नहीं आएगी, ये बात आपको विश्वास दिलाएं.
Nadda also went to Muzaffarpur and interacted with women farmers and lychee cultivators. Earlier, Nadda started his day by offering prayers at Patna's famous Shakti Peeth, Patan Devi Temple. Meanwhile, RJD has slammed BJP's Atmanirbhar Bihar campaign. On the Mahagathbandhan front, in a show of strength, Jharkhand Chief Minister Hemant Soren met RJD President Lalu Prasad Yadav and announced contesting Bihar polls together with the RJD.
हमने कहा कि ये एक उचित प्लेटफॉर्म से ही ये बातें आपको बताई जाएंगी कि कहाँ क्या बात हुई, क्या कितनी बातें हुई, कौन किस तरीके से भूमिका में रहेगा. बिहार में हम लोग 7 चुनाव लड़े, इसकी प्रारूप की तैयारी हो रही है.
नेतृत्व में चुनाव लड़ेगी, लेकिन ये नहीं बोला है कि बिहार के चुनाव के परिणाम के बाद बिहार के मुख्यमंत्री नीतीश कुमार होंगे.
In view of Bihar Assembly polls, seat sharing seems to be the key sticking point in both the electoral alliances. It would be interesting to see whether the seat sharing in both the alliances actually bears fruit, as poll date announcement is just round the corner. With Patna Bureau, Rajesh Raj's report, DD India.
Moving on, over 12 lakh crore rupees were transferred directly into bank accounts of beneficiaries under the Direct Benefit Transfer Scheme. It eliminates the role of middlemen. And over 2.5 lakh crore rupees were transferred in the last 4 months alone during the coronavirus pandemic.
The Modi government has deposited over 12 lakh crore rupees directly into the bank accounts of beneficiaries through direct benefit transfer. With the implementation of DBT scheme, the government has removed the middlemen who've siphoned off funds on the way to the common man. Now every penny sent from the centre is reaching directly into their bank accounts. According to the latest data released, over 12 lakh crore rupees have been directly deposited into the bank accounts of the poor and common people. More than 3 lakh crore rupees have been transferred into the bank accounts of common people till August this year alone. Out of this, over 1.25 lakh crore rupees went into the accounts of the poor during the corona pandemic itself. And in this process, the government also saved 1 lakh crore rupees worth by January 2020, eliminating middlemen or commission. While addressing a DBT program, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had said there was a time in the country when 1 rupee was sent for the poor and farmers, but only 15 paise used to reach them and the rest was consumed by middlemen. Today, all the money that is sent from Delhi is deposited in farmers' accounts. At present, 381 schemes of 52 ministries or departments of the centre are operational through DBT. In the current financial year, more than 116 crore transactions were carried out to send money to the common people. Judicious use of DBT and Aadhaar has not only eliminated the middlemen and brokers, but it has also exposed large-scale corruption and fraud. 4.54 crore duplicate and fake LPG gas connections have been removed. 2.98 crore fake ration cards detected or cancelled. According to the field survey of the Ministry of Rural Development, at least 10% of the amount saved in the MGNREGA. About 5.5 lakh fake beneficiaries under Ministry of Rural Development were also removed. Over 5.26 lakh fake cases came to light under the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, 1.91 lakh beneficiaries were found to be dubious. Over 98.8 lakh fake cases were detected in Anganwadi schemes. 121 lakh metric tons of fertilizer was saved, which was going into fake accounts. The trinity of Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile phones has greatly helped reduce subsidy burden and encouraged an honest and transparent poor-friendly system in the country. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Now, on the eve of Sunday's medical entrance exam, Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank has expressed gratitude to states for making concrete arrangement for the exam in their respective territories in accordance with the Health Ministry's guidelines. He also expressed the confidence that all candidates will follow the COVID-19 guidelines. He said lakhs of students are appearing at more than 3,800 centres on Sunday. He extended his best wishes to all the appearing candidates and their parents for their success. And now take a look at what else is making news around India in our National Roundup segment.
Union Minister for Civil Aviation Hardeep Singh Puri reviewed the progress at the Deoghar airport. He also held discussions with officials of Airport Authority of India. After visiting the site, he said that construction of Deoghar airport is almost complete. Flight operations will be started with a limited number of flights in the first week of November. The terminals will be ready by December. The Civil Aviation Minister, who was in Deoghar to review the progress of the airport, visited the birthplace of Guru Gobind Singh, Harminder Sahib in Patna. Delhi Metro resumed its full services with the Airport Express line reopening on Saturday after over 5 months due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All corridors of the metro network are now in operation and the timing of services will follow the pre-COVID-19 schedule from 6 am till 11 pm. The frequency of trains during non-peak hours will be the same as peak hours, while on Sundays it will commence at 8 in the morning from the 20th of September. However, metro operations will start at 6 in the morning this Sunday to facilitate students for NEET exams. Indian Railways has begun operating 40 pairs of additional special trains on specific routes starting Saturday. Reservations for these trains began on the 10th of September. The trains will be fully reserved, and in addition to the special trains that are already under operation, the composition and route of these trains will be according to existing regular trains. These trains will have both AC and non-AC classes and general coach with reserved seats. There will be no unreserved coaches. 4 pairs of these trains will operate in the Northeast Frontier Railway area. The Director General of Civil Aviation has issued a warning over the Indigo flight incident. The DGCA said that in case any such violation recurs, the schedule of the flight for that particular route shall be suspended for 2 weeks unless airline takes punitive action against violators. This announcement comes a day after DGCA asked Indigo to take appropriate action after it found alleged violation of safety and social distancing protocols by media persons in the airline's Chandigarh-Mumbai flight that had acted Kangana Ranaut as a passenger. China today handed over 5 missing Arunachal youth. These individuals from Upper Subansiri district had inadvertently strayed across the LAC recently. The Indian Army approached the PLA on a hotline to trace and return these individuals. On the 8th of September, response on the hotline confirmed that the missing individuals had been traced. The missing youth will now be quarantined for 14 days according to COVID-19 protocol. BSF troops foiled an attempt by anti-national elements along the Indo-Pak border of Abohar sector in Firozpur district of Punjab. The BSF recovered huge cache of arms and ammunition, including 3 AK-47 rifles with 6 magazines and 91 rounds, 2 M16 rifles with 4 magazines and 57 rounds, and 2 pistols with 4 magazines and 20 rounds. BSF Director General Rakesh Asthana congratulated the vigilant troops on this significant achievement. Meanwhile, search operation is underway. In Jammu and Kashmir, the much-awaited dream project of border residents of Kathua district will soon get wings as Union Minister in PMO Dr. Jitendra Singh and Minister of State for Youth and Sports Kiran Rijiju laid E-Foundation stone for Arun Jaitley Memorial Sports Complex at Hiranagar in Kathua district. Speaking on the occasion, Dr. Singh said sports activities will get a push once the stadium is completed. The stadium will come up on a allotted site of 200 canals of land. The sports complex will have features like synthetic athletic track, skating rink, synthetic turf football ground, synthetic hockey field, tuck shop, boxing ring, multi-purpose hall, cricket ground, swimming pool, illumination of the stadium and pavilion with all basic facilities. The Narcotics Control Bureau has detained a person, Karamjeet, from Andheri West area of Mumbai, allegedly in connection with the drug case related to actor Sushant Singh Rajput's death. Meanwhile, another accused, Zaid Vilatra, moved to Bombay High Court seeking bail. In his plea before the High Court, Vilatra said that the contraband recovered from Abbas Ali Lakhani and Karan Arora was very small in quantity and he was not into any kind of nexus with them.
Right, time for a quick look at some international news from around the world. Now, in Belarus, thousands of anti-government protesters take the streets of capital Minsk, demanding the release of jailed opposition leader. This is the latest in a wave of mass protests following a disputed election. 38-year-old Maria Kolesnikova has emerged as a key opposition figure after others were either jailed or forced out of the country, including Svetlana Shinskaya, who challenged President Lukashenko in the presidential election. In Africa, nearly 50 persons feared dead in Congo gold mine collapse. The mishap happened when an artisanal gold mine collapsed near Kamituga in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The cave-in happened following heavy rains at the Detroit mine site near Kamituga in the country's east. In Myanmar, residents of Yangon built barricades to keep out COVID-19. Barricades made of wood and corrugated iron were put up in Yangon. Move comes as Myanmar grapples with a second wave of infections. People started erecting makeshift roadblocks to stop people freely entering and leaving their homes. And British University in clinical trials for AstraZeneca and Oxford University coronavirus vaccine have resumed following confirmation by the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority that it was safe to do so. The last stage trials of the experimental vaccine were suspended this week after an illness in a study subject in Britain. Right, now to some sports news now. The US Open 2020 is moving on without much of hassle and with some brilliant tennis, even though some of the stars backed out due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, 12 days of the hardcore event are done and dusted, and we have got our 4 finalists in the summit clash of men's and women's singles. Now, men's tennis is going through an exciting time. That also means a new Grand Slam winner in men's tennis in 6 years. Croatia's Marin Cilic was the first-time Grand Slam winner at the 2014 US Open. And in football, the Premier League returns for a season like none before it. There are no fans in the grounds, at least not at first, and the delayed start date means the schedule will be more packed than ever before. There'll be little respite, but plenty of excitement. For Liverpool, so dominant last season on their way to the historic title triumph, the challenge is to retain their crown. And that's a wrap, but news continues here on DD India and DD News. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.